Informative speaking. What is it and how do we do it? Well, informative speeches are speeches based entirely and exclusively on facts, with the main purpose of informing or sharing knowledge rather than persuading or seeking to amuse and inspire. When we're seeking to persuade an audience, we want to change their minds, their beliefs, or their behaviors. But with the informative speeches, we're simply making statements that are irrefutable, based in facts and sharing knowledge. You might think, when do we actually use informative speaking? But we use it a lot in our everyday lives. Teachers like me giving you this knowledge right now is one way that we might use informative speaking in our everyday lives. We might have interactions with coaches, mentors, and leaders who share their lived experiences with us. We might have to talk about work to people outside of our organization or even inform people within our organization what we're doing. And lastly, with the goal of sharing information and imparting knowledge, we might do this when we see an interesting news story or if we're following one of our favorite celebrities and they do something interesting. Notably, when we think of speaking to inform, there are three main purposes that we might have in our speech. When you think about your speech specifically, you want to pick one of these and base your topic and kind of idea around this purpose. So the first might be to build awareness. You might be talking about something impacting a community or talking about something that folks may not know too much about, maybe a niche topic. One might say, telling us about Dungeons and Dragons, right? The second is to demonstrate. So you might actually show the audience how to go through the steps of something. You might talk about how to build a roof on a house. That would be speaking to demonstrate. And lastly, you might explain. Maybe you found a really interesting theory in a psychology or a chemistry class, and you think it would be cool to share with your audience. So you want to explain in more depth what's going on with that theoretical construct. Some ideas of types of informative speeches can range from historical or timelines, talking about events. You might do some sort of biography on a person that you find really interesting. Again, you could talk about processes. You might talk about ideas or concepts, and you could also just talk about categories. Maybe you want to talk about sports like volleyball, football, even basketball. So, how do you pick an informative speech topic? Well, it's really important to try not to be too broad. You have a very short amount of time when you actually get into your speech. And so we can't talk about the entire history, for example, of ballet. We could talk about the history of ballet maybe in the United States, but we can't talk about the entire history of ballet. So you want to make sure that your topic is narrow enough that you can adequately address all of the different points in your speech. Second, are there credible and scholarly sources to integrate into your speech? You might think, oh, well, they said I could talk about demonstrating, so I'll demonstrate how to build a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But are there scholarly and credible sources to back up your statements for maybe the best peanut butter out there? And again, be careful of sneaky persuasion, right? So we need to avoid trying to change beliefs or behavior and strictly stay on informing the audience and providing and imparting knowledge. We want to be accurate in the information that you convey, and there'll be more resources on finding credible sources in a few other videos. And lastly, we want to keep in mind our audience analysis. What does the audience need to be interested and engaged in our speech? Are there specific topics that the audience said that they would like to hear about versus topics that they said they aren't interested in hearing about? This might help you narrow down some ideas for your speech. How do I actually organize my informative speech? Well, it's going to depend on the topic that you choose, but there are a few different ways that you might consider organizing your speech. Now, we always have an introduction and a conclusion, but how we talk about the main points is really what we're talking about when we think about organizing an informative speech. So let's say that you wanted to go with something historical. Maybe you would pick the chronological timeline versus you want to talk about the way things are arranged in a space or something directional, something in movement. You might choose our spatial organizational pattern. Maybe you want to take both sides of an issue, talk about them in a sort of neutral way by providing the pros and the cons. So you do a sort of comparative pattern. You can even do a cause and effect. This thing happened, but why? Let me tell you. And then lastly, we have what's probably the most popular way to organize a speech are topical patterns. So parts of a whole, thinking about talking maybe about the idea of volleyball. You want to explain the sport. Well, in a speech about volleyball, our main points might be the players, their positions, a little bit of history, where did the sport originate, and maybe talking about the sport today, perhaps talking about how it is portrayed in a national and international stage. Overall, if you have any questions about informative speaking or formatting your informative speech, visit the Communication Center. We're here to help and we're excited to work with you.